Have you ever walked into a room, stopped dead in your tracks, and realized you have absolutely no idea why you walked in there?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right, it's like this universal experience. Or maybe you've looked at your own handwriting lately on a birthday card or a check and thought, wait a minute, why does this look like chicken scratch compared to 10 years ago?
I think we have all been there.
Huh?
And usually the default reaction is just to, laugh it off. We say, oh, I'm just getting older, or I need more coffee, or I'm just tired. We completely normalize it.
Exactly. We brush it off. We treat it as this little quirk of aging. But today, we are doing a deep dive into a source that suggests we really, really shouldn't just brush it off.
No, we shouldn't.
We are unpacking Why Isn't My Brain Working by Dr. Datis Kharrazian. And the central thesis here is a bit of a wake-up call, honestly. It suggests that these quirks are actually the sound of your brain sputtering before it completely stalls.
It really is a massive shift in perspective. Dr. Kharrazian challenges the fundamental way modern medicine looks at brain health. You see, we tend to categorize things strictly. You're either healthy or you have a pathology, a disease like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or a brain tumor.
It's binary.
Right, you're fine until the MRI says you aren't. There is no middle ground in the standard medical model.
Precisely. But the source argues that there is a massive, massive gray area in between those two states.
Yeah.
You don't just wake up one day with dementia, it is a process. And those little moments...
But forgetting why you walked into a room.
Exactly. The sloppy handwriting, the fatigue, those are the early warning signs of functional decline. The machinery is breaking down years, sometimes decades, before a disease is diagnosable.
This brings up one of the most interesting concepts from the text, which I think frames this whole discussion, the idea of the neck-down problem in medicine. I found this fascinating because it explains so much about why we miss these signs.
It is a great observation. What stood out to you about that concept? Well, the author notes that traditional medicine is often neck-down, meaning we treat the body, we look at the heart, the liver, the gut, the cholesterol, we treat the machine. Or if we do look neck up, it is strictly the domain of psychology and psychiatry.
Right. We talk about feelings and neurotransmitters in the abstract.
Yes, exactly. But we rarely connect the biology of the body to the physical function of the brain.
We treat the brain like it is this floating entity separate from the biology of the rest of the body. We rarely ask how the gut is physically affecting the brain or how blood sugar is physically killing neurons. So the mission of this deep dive is to bridge that gap. We're going to look at how the brain actually works as an organ, how to spot those specific warning signs, lobe by lobe, which is truly fascinating, and the three critical things every single neuron needs to survive.
And to understand what functional decline really looks like in the real world, we have to start with the story of Jackie from the book. Because this wasn't some elderly person in a nursing home. This feels like a story that could happen to anyone we know.
No, and that is why her story is so unsettling. Jackie was only 42. A high-powered attorney, mother of two. She was someone who had built her entire identity and career on her cognitive sharpness. She was a brain worker.
But things started slipping, and it wasn't just, oh, I forgot my keys.
It was much more systemic. It started with small things. She couldn't remember phone numbers long enough to type them into her phone. That short-term working memory buffer was failing. She was fatigued constantly. She was dealing with what she thought was depression.
And physically, there were signs, too, right? It wasn't just in her head. The book mentions her physical appearance actually changed.
This is key. She had facial paresis, that is a slight drooping of the face, and she walked slowly, with very little arm swing. Now, to a functional neurologist, those are screaming red flags. Those are clear signs of degeneration in specific brain pathways. But when she went to her standard GP, what happened?
The usual. They ran the standard panels, cholesterol was fine, blood pressure was fine. They told her she was just aging, or maybe she was stressed because of the demanding job.
And this highlights the danger of that gray area. Her blood work looked normal by standard neck-down metrics. But functionally, her brain was degenerating. She was showing early signs of decline that were completely dismissed as just life.
You mentioned depression there. I think this is a huge point the source makes that we really need to unpack. We tend to think of depression as purely emotional, sadness, grief, or maybe chemically vague, like low serotonin. But Dr. Kharrazian frames it very differently. He talks about it as a hardware problem.
He does. He frames depression often as a frontal cortex impairment.
Which is the CEO of the brain.
Exactly. The frontal cortex gives you motivation, drive, focus, and impulse control. If those neurons aren't firing effectively, maybe due to inflammation, maybe due to lack of blood flow, you don't just lose the ability to do math. You lose your mojo. You lose the physical drive to get off the couch.
So it is not just, I feel sad. It is, my brain literally does not have the energy to generate the electrical signal for motivation.
Spot on. And the critique here is the one symptom equals one drug model. If you have depression, standard care gives you an antidepressant. But if the depression is caused by, say, a firing issue in the frontal lobe due to gut inflammation, the drug might mask the symptom for a while, but the brain keeps degenerating underneath. You are painting over rust.
That is a terrifying thought. Painting over rust while the metal just eats away underneath. So if we want to catch this rust before the engine falls out, we need to know what to look for. The book offers this incredible guided tour of the brain, breaking it down lobe by lobe. The symptoms are surprisingly specific. Let's start where you just mentioned, the CEO, the frontal lobe.
Right behind your forehead.
Huh.
This is what makes us human. It handles personality, impulse control, planning, and voluntary muscle movement.
And the sign of failure here that really stuck with me was the handwriting. I never would have connected that to brain health.
It is a huge indicator. It is called micrographia.
Micrographia, small writing.
Yes. Writing requires incredibly complex, fine motor control. It is a very heavy tax on the frontal lobe. If you look at your handwriting from 5 years ago versus today, has it gotten smaller? Has it gotten sloppier? If your signature looks different than it did a year ago, that is not just rushing. That is a sign of rapid degeneration in the frontal lobe's ability to control motor output.
Okay, I have a feeling a lot of people are checking their signatures right now, but it is not just motor skills, is it? It is behavior. The book mentions things that sound like major personality changes.
Yes, impulse control. The frontal lobe suppresses our primitive urges. If it starts to fail, the filter falls off. You might find yourself saying things you know you shouldn't, inappropriate jokes, sudden angry outbursts, or, and this is controversial but fascinating, laziness.
Laziness as a symptom, that feels like it lets a lot of people off the hook.
It completely changes the conversation, doesn't it? We often judge laziness as a character flaw. Oh, he just doesn't want to work.
Yeah.
But if your frontal lobe, the motivation center, isn't firing, you physically cannot generate the ambition to complete a task. It is a neurological symptom, just like a limp is a physical symptom.
That changes how you look at procrastination. It might not be a lack of discipline, it might be a lack of voltage.
Okay, moving on. The temporal lobe. This is on the sides, near the ears.
Correct. This is the memory center. It houses the hippocampus, which is the heavy lifter for processing new memories.
And the symptom here that scared me a bit was the GPS factor.
This is very common. The temporal lobe handles spatial navigation. If you find yourself needing GPS to go to the grocery store you have visited for 10 years, or you get turned around on familiar routes, that is a classic sign of temporal lobe decline. Your internal map is fading.
And the memory loss is specific, right? It is not just forgetting absolutely everything. The source seemed to focus on short-term things. It is usually short-term memory first. And that is because the hippocampus is like the save button. You can remember your wedding day from 30 years ago in vivid detail, because that is already stored in long-term archives. It has been moved to the hard drive, so to speak. But you cannot remember what you had for lunch yesterday because the save button is broken. Or you walk into a room and have zero clue why you were there.
That why am I in this room moment. That is a temporal lobe glitch.
Exactly. The context simply didn't get saved. Also, auditory issues. The temporal lobe processes sound. So trouble hearing when there is background noise, like the cocktail party effect. If you are in a crowded restaurant and you cannot distinguish your friend's voice from the clatter of dishes, that is often the temporal lobe failing to process the sound data, not your ears failing to hear it.
Okay, let's go to the parietal lobe. I always think of this as the where am I lobe.
That is a very good way to put it. It is the GPS for your physical body. It tells you where your limbs are in space.
Proprioception.
So if this is failing, am I just clumsy? Essentially, yes. You are the person bumping your shoulder into the door frame when you walk through. You are tripping over your own feet. But here's a really specific test the author mentions. Instability in the dark.
Because you can't rely on your eyes.
Exactly. We rely on three things for balance. Eyes, inner ear, and the parietal lobe knowing where your feet are. If the parietal lobe is weak, you rely heavily on your eyes to compensate. The moment you turn off the lights or close your eyes in the shower to wash your hair, you feel like you are going to fall over. That is a parietal sign.
Fascinating. And finally, the cerebellum, the little brain at the back.
The coordinator,
Yeah.
balance and coordination. And the author uses a great analogy here that really simplifies it, the DUI test.
Right. He says roadside sobriety tests are basically cerebellum tests.
They are. Walking a straight line, touching your nose with your finger, standing on one foot.
Yeah.
Alcohol directly suppresses the cerebellum. But if you struggle to do these things while stone cold sober, that suggests cerebellar degeneration. Also, being a cheap date. If your alcohol tolerance has completely tanked, that is a sign your cerebellum is already weak.
There was one detail here that I found bizarre but so memorable. The pinstripe shirt. It sounds like a joke, but he was dead serious.
Yes, this is such a nuanced detail. The cerebellum processes complex visual data related to movement. If your cerebellum is weak, looking at complex patterns like a tight pinstripe shirt or busy wallpaper can actually make you nauseous.
It is like getting carsick while standing completely still.
Exactly. Your brain cannot process the visual conflict. So if you can't handle looking at your colleague's striped shirt, or if scrolling through a web page too fast makes you dizzy, you might need to check your cerebellum health. The author even avoids wearing pinstripes in his clinic for this exact reason.
So we have this map of decline: frontal, temporal, parietal, cerebellum. But the book isn't just about things falling apart. It introduces the concept of plasticity. Now, we usually hear this as a purely positive thing. Brain plasticity is great, keep learning. But the book argues it is a double-edged sword.
It is. Plasticity is simply the brain's ability to remold itself. We used to think you were born with a set number of neurons and that was it. But we now know it is not about the number of neurons, it is about the connections, the dendrites between them.
The use it or lose it principle.
Exactly. And the source uses the tap dancing teacher as a prime example of positive plasticity. She was in her 50s, but had the brain connectivity of someone much younger because she was constantly learning new steps, new rhythms. Her brain was highly efficient.
They compared her to her students, right? And the scan results were surprising.
Yes, and this is totally counterintuitive. On scans, her brain actually showed less activity than the students to do the exact same physical task. That sounds bad, but it is actually fantastic. It means her brain was so efficient, so plastic, it didn't have to work as hard. That is what we want. We want high efficiency, long-term potentiation.
The monk studies showed something similar with gamma waves too, but then there is negative plasticity. You can actually get really good at being bad.
That is the danger. Plasticity just means the brain gets better at what it does repeatedly. If you practice chronic pain, meaning if you have an injury and the pain signals keep firing over and over, your brain gets very efficient at feeling pain. Even after the physical injury heals, the brain might keep generating the pain because it has learned that pathway so well. Phantom limb pain is a version of this. The limb is gone, but the brain has become an absolute expert at feeling it hurt.
And the video game example, this one is going to worry some parents, but we need to talk about it. The author draws a direct line between hours of gaming and brain structure.
It is a compelling argument about how we wire our kids. Think about a child playing violent video games for hours a day. What part of the brain are they using constantly? The limbic system. Fight or flight, survival, react, react, react.
And what part are they not using?
The frontal lobe, the part that says calm down or let's think this through or let's be empathetic. So via negative plasticity, you get a brain that is highly skilled at aggression and reaction in the limbic system and actually atrophied in the frontal lobe because it is never being challenged.
So you end up with an impulsive, aggressive kid because that is literally how they have exercised their brain. They have been doing heavy bicep curls on their aggression center.
Precisely. They are experts at virtual survival, but complete novices at real-world emotional regulation.
Okay, so we know what can go wrong. We know the warning signs and the dangers of bad plasticity. Let's pivot to the solution, the maintenance manual. The author says there are 3 non-negotiable things every single neuron needs to survive: oxygen, glucose, and stimulation. Let's break these down because this is the real how-to part of the deep dive.
Think of a neuron like a high-performance car engine. It needs air, which is oxygen, it needs fuel, which is glucose, and you have to actually take it out and drive it, which is stimulation. If you miss any one of those 3, the car dies.
Starting with oxygen, this connects back to the cold feet symptom, doesn't it? I always thought that was just poor circulation. Like, oh, I just need thicker socks in the winter.
It is poor circulation, but think about what that actually means. The brain is a greedy organ. It consumes a massive amount of oxygen, about 20% of your body's total intake. If you have poor circulation, meaning your hands and feet are always cold, it is highly likely your brain is also not getting enough blood flow.
And the nail fungus. That was a slightly gross but incredibly specific detail that I think is worth bringing up.
It is specific, but it makes perfect sense biologically. If you have chronic fungal growth on your toes, why is it there? It is because your immune system, which travels in the blood, cannot get down there effectively to fight it off. If blood isn't getting to your toes, it is probably struggling to get to the tiny microcapillaries in your brain too.
So poor posture from being a desk jockey, anemia, smoking, all of these aren't just bad for your lungs or your back. They are literally suffocating the brain.
Correct. You are starving the engine of air.
Mm-hmm.
White fingernails, poor capillary refill, asthma. These are all brain health issues in disguise.
Number 2 is glucose, the fuel.
Hmm.
But this is a Goldilocks situation, right? Not too little, not too much.
Exactly. Glucose must be stable. If it drops too low, which is hypoglycemia, you get hangry, you get shaky, lightheaded, and you lose focus. And here is a massive sign we see all the time. Waking up at 3 a.m. with your heart pounding or your mind racing.
That 3 a.m. wake up, I think a lot of people just assume that is stress or maybe having a full bladder, but you are saying it is a sugar crash.
Often, yes. Your blood sugar drops so low during the night that your brain literally thinks it is dying. So it sends an emergency signal to the adrenal glands to release adrenaline to mobilize stored sugar. That adrenaline wakes you up in a panic. That is your brain screaming for fuel.
And then there's the flip side.
Yeah.
Too much sugar, insulin resistance.
This is the classic food coma. You eat lunch and immediately need a nap. Or you crave sweets right after a big meal. Or your waist is larger than your hips. This is incredibly damaging. High blood sugar creates massive inflammation. The author even refers to the direct link between blood sugar issues and Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes.
That is a label that really sticks, type 3 diabetes. It really shows how diet isn't just about your waistline. It is about brain preservation.
Absolutely. If you cannot regulate sugar, you are inflaming and starving your brain simultaneously.
Yeah.
You are essentially caramelizing your neurons.
And the third need, stimulation. We talked about this with plasticity. You need to actively use the brain. But there's a warning here that I found really important. You cannot just go run a mental marathon if you haven't trained.
Right. This is where well-meaning people get it wrong. They feel their brain slipping, so they buy an intense brain training game or decide to learn a complex new language in a week.
Yeah.
But if your neurons are already weak, if they lack oxygen or stable glucose, and you overstimulate them, they do not get stronger. They die.
It is like trying to rev a sports car engine with no oil in it.
Exactly. This is why some people try to study hard or even just watch a really loud action movie and end up with a crushing headache or extreme fatigue. Their neuronal battery was completely empty and they tried to draw a high voltage. You have to build endurance. Fix the fuel and oxygen first, then add the stimulation.
Balance is key. You need to be, as the book eloquently says, a scholar and an athlete.
Physical movement stimulates the brain, and mental challenge stimulates the brain. You truly need both for a charge.
Let's move to the final piece of the puzzle, which really connects the top to the bottom, the gut-brain axis. The author has this fascinating comparison between the aging brain and the infant brain.
It is a very visual way to understand the autonomic nervous system. Think about a newborn baby. Their brain isn't developed yet. Specifically, the frontal cortex is completely offline. What are their symptoms?
High heart rate, dilated pupils, they seem kind of stressed out all the time.
And they have terrible digestion. They spit up, they get colicky, they have gas. This is because they are totally dominant in the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system.
And as we grow up, our brain develops and suppresses that response.
Yes. As the frontal cortex comes online, it activates the parasympathetic system. The rest and digest system, specifically via the vagus nerve, it calms the heart, constricts the pupils, and turns on healthy digestion.
But then as we age,
We revert. As the brain degenerates, it loses control over the gut. The rest and digest signal gets weak. So what happens to the elderly? Chronic constipation, poor digestion, high heart rate. It is not just an old stomach, it is an old brain failing to tell the stomach what to do.
so if the brain, the caller, is losing its voice, the gut simply doesn't get the message.
Exactly. So if you are treating chronic gut issues like IBS or constipation, and you are entirely ignoring the brain, you might be missing the root cause. You can take all the expensive probiotics you want, but if the vagus nerve isn't firing, the gut won't move.
This has been an intense journey. There is so much that can go wrong. We've talked about atrophy, suffocation, inflammation, but we do not want to leave everyone in a panic. The text does offer hope.
It offers immense hope. The central message is that function can be improved. Biology is not destiny, and the absolute best proof of this is the nun study.
Right, tell us about the nuns. This is an incredible study.
Researchers studied a group of nuns, some well over 100 years old. These women lived highly active, intellectual lives, constantly reading, writing complex essays in their 20s, debating, teaching. After they passed away, autopsies showed that some of their brains were full of Alzheimer's plaques. Biologically, their physical brains were ravaged by the disease.
But in real life,
They showed no symptoms whatsoever. They were sharp, witty, and highly active until the very end.
how is that even possible? If the physical hardware was broken, how did the software keep running?
Cognitive reserve. They had spent their entire lives learning and engaging. They had built so many redundant neural connections, so much positive plasticity, that their brains just routed around the physical damage. They had built a superhighway system, so when one road got blocked by a plaque, traffic just took a highly efficient detour.
That is incredible. It means that even if you have the genetic predisposition or even the actual pathology starting, you can potentially outrun the symptoms.
Exactly. And the book highlights stories like Ryan, a brain injury survivor. He had severe physical trauma, but through targeted nutrition to reduce inflammation and highly targeted stimulation, he regained incredible function. It wasn't about growing brand new neurons, but about maximizing what was left. Or the diabetic patient who entirely reversed their cognitive symptoms just by changing their diet.
So if you are listening to this and feeling a little worried about your handwriting getting sloppy or your balance in the dark, there are concrete things you can do.
Absolutely. It is highly actionable. Look at your hands. Are they pink and warm? That is a quick check on your circulation. Check your blood sugar. Do you crash and need a nap after meals? Fix your diet to stabilize that crucial fuel. And challenge your brain. Learn something genuinely new, but pace yourself. Ensure your battery is charged first.
It really comes down to this core idea. Your brain isn't just a mysterious organ in a jar. It is intimately connected to everything you do, everything you eat, and everything you feel.
And here's a thought to leave you with, something to mull over. We spend so much time worrying about our outward appearance, our muscle tone, fighting off wrinkles. But your brain defines your personality. It holds your precious memories of your loved ones. It dictates your patience, your humor, and your joy. If you let that decay, who are you?
That is a heavy but incredibly necessary question to ask yourself. Are you just getting older, or are you actually letting your sense of self slip away? Dr. Datis Kharrazian's work provides a compelling roadmap to hold on to that self. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep an eye on those warning signs.
My pleasure entirely. Take care of your neurons.
We will see you next time.